facing more traffic
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
Today, this is James O'Neill. European leaders sharply criticized Russia after 5 hours of Ukraine peace talks on Tuesday produced no progress. Officials from Estonia, Finland, and Germany said President Vladimir Putin has shown no willingness to negotiate and is instead intensifying battlefield aggression to buy time. They condemned his public remarks, blaming Europe for prolonging the war and suggesting a wider conflict would be Europe's fault. The UK called Putin's statements dangerous and saber-rattling. EU leaders are debating whether to use £140 billion in frozen Russian assets as a loan to support Ukraine's war effort, arguing Russia must face increased costs for aggression. Belgium remains opposed over legal and retaliation concerns. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen insisted Europe wants peace but must increase pressure on Moscow. France has ordered heightened security at Christmas markets due to a very high terrorist threat level. Interior Minister Laura Nunez instructed regional prefects to boost vigilance, deploy police and potentially soldiers for a visible deterrent, and ensure intelligence services are fully mobilized to detect and prevent attacks. France has faced numerous deadly extremist assaults in public spaces, including the 2016 Nice truck attack, while similar attacks have targeted German Christmas markets. The expanded security reflects a trend across Europe where public spaces are increasingly fortified with barriers and patrols. Some German cities have canceled their markets entirely because compliance and protection costs have become too high. The United Kingdom and Norway have agreed to conduct joint naval patrols to protect undersea cables and counter increased Russian submarine activity in the North Atlantic. The pact, announced during Prime Minister Keir Starmer's talks in London with Norwegian leader Jonas Gahr Støre, will deploy at least 13 warships, 8 British and 5 Norwegian frigates purchased under a £10 billion defense deal. The nations will also integrate Norwegian missiles into the Royal Navy. The leaders plan to visit RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland to meet crews monitoring Russian vessels, as the UK reports a 30% rise in Russian naval movements near its waters. The FBI has arrested a 30-year-old Virginia resident, Brian Cole Jr., as a suspect in planting 2 pipe bombs outside Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters the night before the January 6th Capitol riot. The devices did not detonate, but were discovered the next afternoon near the time Congress met to certify the 2020 election. Neighbors described Cole as reclusive, with law enforcement sources linking him to anarchist ideology. The 5-year investigation previously drew criticism for slow progress and limited transparency.
When you let good cops be cops, this is what happens. I'm eternally grateful to the team behind me, to the leadership at the FBI who made this possible. But I do want to highlight when I introduced the deputy, he made this case and so many others, including summer heat, his priority to come in here and solve it for the American people. And today, I'm proud to stand here before you and say, we solved it. He will have his day in court. The American public and the world will learn even more information through the legal process, as we have committed under this Attorney General. We are the most transparent law enforcement operation in U.S. history, but we are also going to make sure accountability is delivered to its fullest extent, and that happens in the courts of law.
Nigel Farage condemned Labour's decision to delay local elections.
The whole local government reorganisation is a dog's dinner. The public don't understand what's going on. You're asking people in Clacton to vote in local elections year after year after year. You're telling them we're going to get rid of a district council that they know and understand and respect and replace it with a pretty amorphous unitary authority. So, if that is going to go ahead, clearly it is, I don't like it, but clearly it is, you need a senior elected figure.
Order.
And we need a mayor.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Hey there, I'm Lance Bass, and this is CHIP. For more than 100 years, American Humane has been on the front lines protecting animals in times of crisis. From Pearl Harbor to 9/11, the California wildfires, and the coronavirus pandemic, American Humane Rescue has provided life-saving assistance for animals in virtually every major national disaster. If you're anything like me, your pets mean the world to you. And if disaster strikes, you want to keep them safe. To prepare for an oncoming disaster, ensure your pet has secure and up-to-date identification. And if you must evacuate, remember to take your disaster preparedness kit with you. To learn more about disaster planning and how to keep your best friends safe, please visit AmericanHumane.org.
G'day, Troy Casadale here. I've been travelling around this country playing music for more years than I'd like to remember. I've spent a lot of time on stage, but I reckon I've spent more time on the roads getting to gigs. And honestly, I've seen worse behaviour on the roads than I've seen at any concert of mine, and often from people who have years of experience behind the wheel. It's probably been a while since a lot of us have really thought about our driving, so take a sec and think about what you can do to help keep yourself and others safe on the roads. Us mob are almost 3 times more likely to die in a road crash than the rest of the population. So let's change that. Drive safely. Don't get distracted by the phone or others in the car, or get hot-headed or any of that stuff. You wouldn't do inconsiderate things outside a car, so why do them in one? Don't let a car change who you are. Safer driving starts with you.
Telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to the big issue today. We're looking at assisted dying legislation. The Guardian exposed a leaked document raising concerns over the UK government's control over Kim Leadbeater's Private Members Bill on assisted dying. The terminally ill adults, that's end of life, bill proposed to legislise assisted dying for terminally ill adults in England and Wales. This controversy comes ahead of a major battle in the House of Lords continuing this Friday, where many opposing peers have tabled hundreds of amendments for debate, which has been seen by some as an effort to filibuster the bill. Now, those on the pro side still fear it will run out of time in the parliamentary session and have been holding private talks to persuade peers not to tie up the bill using parliamentary tactics. A spokesperson for Leadbeater said they categorically denied that the MP had any conversations with Number 10 or the party leadership before she took up the issue of assisted dying after winning the Private Members Bill ballot. However, the leak raised fresh questions over how much government control there's been over the Private Members Bill. It also suggests that the Labor government has again lied to everyone and had a parallel policy-making process that bypassed Labor's election manifesto, along with the consultation with MPs, unions and members, and deliberately evaded public scrutiny on an issue of huge importance. We have to ask, why would such an important piece of legislation not pass through a consultation process, and why is Labor so desperate to pass this legislation? Our panel today will look at the UK controversy, the problems with this kind of legislation, and the operation of assisted dying laws in other countries, such as Australia and Canada. Our first guest today, she's an old friend of TNT from way back, and a very, very credible guest, to say that at the least. Our guest is Professor Gloria Moss, founder of Truth University. And Gloria, thank you for joining us. We haven't spoken to you for at least a year and a half, and it's so nice to have you back.
Oh, well, it's great to be back. And doesn't time fly?
It does. We don't look any older, do we?
No, I don't think so.
Can you tell me your thoughts, just an overview on what we have so far, please?
Well, we have a bit of a cause célèbre, I think. I mean, already things were odd, to use the adjective used by a professor of public law, Mark Elliott, at Cambridge University, in his blog on the Private Members Bill. He described it as odd. Maybe that was a diplomatic term. He didn't go further than that. But things have got a stage further now with, as you say, the leaking of a report courtesy of a Guardian article on the 3rd of December. And that leaked report, the Guardian has quoted from it, so it's very likely a credible allegation that's being made that there was this report, that before coming to power, the Labour government was discussing in this paper how a private member's bill, PMB, could be used to legalise assisted dying. And and the note went on to suggest that this vehicle, the private member's bill, would allow the government room to heavily influence the parliamentary process. So not just were they planning to introduce this through the back door, as you say, via a private member's bill, but also using a vehicle that would afford the government what they call political cover in that note, controlling the parameters of legislation carefully. So this is what the Guardian has revealed just a couple of days ago, as if the waters weren't muddy enough already.
Yep, it's very, as we pop into the wrong one there, it's very interesting, isn't it? And I would imagine that the spend on palliative care has reduced. Would you agree on that? And is it progressively or regressively decreasing?
I didn't quite catch that.
The spend on palliative care, I would imagine, it's reducing. I would imagine,
It is reducing, and one of the terms of the bill was that hospices, for example, could not continue were they not to accept so-called assisted dying, which of course many palliative care doctors have considered to be completely unacceptable. But then, there's so much about the bill that opponents have said is completely unacceptable. And in fact, many would argue that the use of a private member's bill for something of the reach, complexity and length of the assisted dying bill, which is formally known as the Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill, that the use of a private member's bill was wholly inappropriate, not only because of the subject matter of the bill, but also because, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, that if you go down the private members bill route, as opposed to going down the government bill route, if you go down the PMB route, then there are a whole host of things you don't need to do that you would have to do were you to push this through using the normal process of a government bill. You don't need pre-legislative, formal public and stakeholder consultation. I mean, just take that in for a moment. On a subject that stands to affect everybody, using a PMB, they can circumvent pre-legislation, formal public and stakeholder consultation. They can circumvent government-led policy development, pre-legislative scrutiny involving the Law Commission and the Royal Commission. That can also be circumvented. And they don't need to produce an impact statement following engagement with interested parties. In fact, the impact statement was produced by the government, but very, very, very late on in the process. And all of this, well, much of this, not all of it, but much of this, courtesy of the fact that the whole thing was pushed through a private member's bill. And quite aside from that very inappropriate use of a private member's bill, which is really designed for much smaller pieces of legislation, much less complex. I mean, this is so complex that it involves a change in the NHS Charter, for example. I mean, it's absolutely massive, but quite apart from the inappropriate use of the Private Members Bill, there have been several severe breaches of process on the way. And, well, I've spent a lot of my life, not all of it, I used to work in industry, but I moved from industry into academia. And, well, you know, we've all had this experience at school, and if we've been to university, at university too, that we're very often assessed through an examination, aren't we? And we're told it's a 2-hour exam or a 3-hour exam, and, you know, if you write beyond the stop writing now, you're disqualified. Well, you know, we stick to the rules, but it doesn't seem as though the Parliament has stuck to the rules prescribed by the Hansard Society. There have been many, many flagrant breaches of process, and it's all very concerning. And I omitted to mention that when you go down the PMB route, the Private Members Bill route, you don't need to be compliant with the same human rights and equalities compliance requirements as government bills. And that led to a situation where the committee in the House of Commons that was considering the bill in detail had an unequal number of opponents and proponents on it. It was heavily skewed in the direction of proponents. And that was because it was a private member's bill. That unequal incidence of proponents and opponents could not have occurred had this been a government bill. And not just that, the inequality extended to the witnesses who were called. And so there were many important, vital stakeholder groups who were not heard. For example, the Deaf and Disabled Coalition. They never got to give their witness statement in person. Likewise, the Geriatric Society. I mean, one group, you know, older folk, you would imagine should be heard at that committee stage. They were not heard, and nor was the Stand Against Domestic Abuse group heard.
Just in regards to the UK, those terminally ill with less than 6 months to live could have assisted dying offered unprompted by a doctor, suggesting, and this would suggest that their life is not worth living or too much trouble to treat with the palliative care. It's all at a particularly incredibly stressful time of a person's life. And then there's lack of independent oversight mechanisms to prevent coercion and abuse of those vulnerable. I don't understand Western society at the moment. I think we've lost the plot. Our moral compass is of zero. And even though we do have those and I understand that where they would like to have the decision when they exit this part of their lives. However, having said that, it does create opportunities for those wishing to exit someone from this part of their being, doesn't it?
Well, yes, and this is a key point, really good that you've raised that point, that has been raised by many people who are concerned about this bill, that pressure could be placed on those who might feel a burden to the rest of society, to their loved ones. And I mean, this is a very, very real risk, and not being addressed by the bill. And incidentally, there's a very deep irony in this bill, which is called the official term. I mean, it's popularly referred to as the assisted dying bill, or the suicide bill, more like. But the official term is the terminally ill adults end of life bill. And I believe that the definition of terminal illness is when a prognosis has been offered of 6 months left to live. And the irony here is that a well-known figure, shall we say, in Britain has been having conversations with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He had a widely publicised telephone conversation with this well-known figure, Dame Esther Rantzen, before he became Prime Minister, and he pledged in a conversation with her to make time for debate and a free vote on the issue. Now, Esther Rantzen was, so we're told, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer back in 2023, being at one point, we're told, informed by the doctor that she had just weeks to live. And yet here she is still 2 years on, I think most recently, telling us that the cancer has spread to another part of the body and she'll have to bring forward Christmas because she may not survive. But, you know, if she was terminally ill, well, that terminal illness has been, you know, I'm sorry for anybody who has that diagnosis, but in her case, her life has not been cut short within the timescale that's presented in the bill. She's lived way beyond the 6 months. So that in itself should be a warning to people that a terminal diagnosis does not mean the end. You know, and this, while there's life, there's still hope.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm just reading some stuff, and it is appalling. Now, what's your gut feeling on this? Do you think they're going to get this through?
Well, a PMB process, parliamentary, a private members bill process, has been selected, and yeah, I mean, if you were a cynic and you thought that what's been released by The Guardian is true, and there's no reason so far not to believe that, because we've been given quite extensive quotes by The Guardian from this paper, a cynic might suggest that yes, perhaps the government did think that this could be sneaked through a private members bill, curtailing consultation, as I said, allowing unequal numbers of MPs to proponents in a majority on the committee as against the opponents, it does have those advantages if you're a cynic for a government. But on the other hand, and here's the rub, the House of Lords absolutely has the power to reject a private member's bill. There is no disputing this fact, and in fact, very recently in September, the Constitution Committee of the House of Lords stated clearly in a report that it is constitutionally appropriate for the House of Lords to scrutinise the bill, and if so minded, vote to amend or reject it. So what I'm saying here is that yes, a private member's bill affords, if you like, an easier ride in the House of Commons, but it is absolutely within the powers of the House of Lords to vote it down if they consider that that is the correct course of action. And as you referred to earlier, Mike, the hundreds of amendments proposed by the House of Lords suggest that they're anything but happy with the state of the bill. I'm not surprised, because it was rushed through the committee stage. As we heard, the committee was staffed, if I can use that term, by a preponderance of proponents of the bill. So many of the amendments that were proposed by the opponents in the House of Commons committee were voted down.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very interesting indeed. Can I just ask you just to hang on? We're going to go to a very short break, and I want to come back with Professor David Richards, and I want to have a discussion that we can. I mean, I still don't understand. I do not understand where society is heading. We look at Canada; they're ramping it up more and more. We look at the rest of the world. and notably in Europe, Australia, and I think we need to talk about these things. And I mean, a question before we go to a commercial break, Gloria, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Because at the moment there's train coming towards us, and some would say it's light. I think it's more than that. I think it's the light of the train coming at an incredibly fast rate towards us.
Absolutely. I think there is light because we need to be mindful of the fact that Parliament must follow due process. As I said, we're all used to sitting in exams throughout our lives, and you can't go on writing beyond the time allotted for the exam. And if Parliament has breached its processes, which it has in many, many cases, for example, just to give one example of many, the government in Britain has declared neutrality, or Keir Starmer has declared neutrality. But it's not as simple as that. There is a whole process for declaring neutrality. Documents need to be submitted at a particular point in the process, and they were never submitted in the prescribed timescale. That is a breach of process. Likewise, there's some very, very extraordinary things that we've been witnessing. The Secretary to the Cabinet, Simon Case, told ministers, by virtue of the government neutrality, which I say hasn't been properly authorised, sanctioned through the appropriate documents, the Secretary to the Cabinet told ministers that they were to remain silent in Parliament when the assisted dying bill was being debated. And, well, I refer you again to the Professor of Public Law, Mark Elliott, at Cambridge University, who described that as odd. I mean, why would you not allow? Could it be that two of the ministers, that's to say the health and the justice ministers, were both inclined to be opposed to the bill rather than supportive of the bill?
My guest is a very, very good friend of our station and speaks a lot of sense, and we're going to rejoin Gloria Moss in 1 second. Go to a quick commercial break, and up next, Dr. David Richards, a professor of medicine. That's right here, by the way, at this new program. It's called The Big Issue, and very, very happy to have you as part of it. I'm just trying to get things to work here.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
And back again, my guest. I've got a lot of echo coming in from one of our guests at the moment, and it's if ever you watch Helter Skelter, and you've had a few drinks doing so, you'll know exactly how my head is feeling at the moment. So I need a doctor. Do you know of one, Dr. David Richards?
I do, Mike. I do. Nice to see you, Mike. Nice.
Likewise. I need a drink already. Dr. David, or Professor David Richards, a magnificent doctor, by the way, Gloria. David, can you tell us the difference between euthanasia and assisted dying, please?
Well, oh gosh, that's a tricky question. I don't know whether well, euthanasia, I guess, is where somebody takes a conscious decision to end their life, and they're involved in that. You know, that they're not near death's door, so to speak. They have they feel that their quality of life is, sort of not sufficiently valuable to justify continuing their existence, and so they opt to relieve their suffering early through the assistance of a practitioner and so forth. Assisted dying is where someone is said to be approaching death, and in that situation, the practitioner may try to alleviate the suffering that is sometimes associated with their condition or the approach of death. And in the course of that action and that treatment, it may well accelerate the path or course towards their death. And so those are the fine-grained differences between the two. But effectively, the boundaries are quite blurred in many respects. And I just want to pick up on something that Gloria mentioned about the accuracy of a terminal diagnosis. And studies have been done on this and have shown that doctors are terribly bad at predicting when someone is going to die. In fact, in one study, they only had a 50% success rate. And so, especially a patient who might be an elderly patient who goes into hospital, the doctor may never have seen that patient before, knows nothing about their history. It's so easy to jump to a conclusion that that person has got very limited life expectancy without knowing some of the more some of the background and more important factors that have brought that person to the hospital. And remember, when a person goes to hospital, they're often in the worst state they've been for a long, long time. So you're seeing them at their worst, and so it's really easy to jump to a premature conclusion that this person is terminally ill, and hence push them down that pathway towards terminal care treatment.
Gloria, would you like to also add to that?
Well, yes. I mean, the mind can have a tremendous effect. Would you agree, Doctor, on people's health? I'm actually I've been organising questioning history and questioning science conferences now for many years. We've got one coming up next March. If anybody's interested in joining us, this isn't an advert, but it's important truths coming out. Do contact us at learningholidays@protonmail.com, and we've got several speakers who are talking about the power of belief, for example, to affect health. And we know about the power of the mind because we know that people can respond positively when they're given, when they think they've been given drugs and they haven't actually been given drugs. It's very well documented. And we talk about mind and body. We can't really separate these two. So the minute somebody's given a prognosis of terminal illness, the body will be, the mind will be affecting, I would have thought, the outcome. What do you think?
Well, if you're asking me, I mean, basically, it's a very complex situation, I find that decisions are made very frequently in hospital situations, which lead to very disastrous outcomes. I mean, you've got to understand. For example, I worked for a number of years in intensive care in Gloucester and Cheltenham over in the UK, and in those situations, you're under a lot of pressure, a lot of time pressure, and you have to make decisions in a very short space of time, not knowing anything about the patient's history. You may get a vague history from a relative, or sometimes, if you're lucky, a doctor. But to make decisions on someone's life or death decisions in that situation is fraught with difficulty, and it's very easy for an inexperienced or a doctor who is tired, working long hours, to make a decision that doesn't reflect the wider health or considerations of that individual. And I've been privileged in working in the United Kingdom in the NHS system and in Australia now for many years, and I can see the differences in the approach. And this goes back an awful long way. There's been, especially in the NHS introduced a system of health rationing many years ago, where decisions were made to restrict access to treatment streams, and that in itself led to premature deaths and adverse outcomes in its own right. But of course, this reached a pinnacle, I should say, in the late 1990s, when they introduced the Liverpool Care Pathway, where basically this assisted dying program was basically introduced and became widespread. And what happened was that there was an acceleration. People who legitimately may have had years or substantial time of life ahead of them were pushed into these pathways, these Liverpool Care Pathways, and this reached, I think it was about 2012, 2013. This reached the national headlines, whereby thousands of individuals in the United Kingdom were accelerated prematurely to death because they were put into these end-of-life pathways, and it was a dark day for the NHS over in the UK, and the Liverpool Care Pathway was removed. But come 2020, with COVID, the Liverpool Care Pathway was essentially revived in an article called NG 163, where basically the same pathways were introduced. And what we saw again were catastrophic levels of death, where doctors and nursing homes were asked to administer drugs that had substantial effects. I mean, using end-of-life pathway drugs, or not even end-of-life pathway drugs, but drugs that suppress respiration in a nursing home situation, can lead to bad outcomes, and that's exactly what we saw. And in Australia, Wilson Tsai did a very close analysis of the deaths in the UK, and he was able to show very clearly that the majority of deaths in 2020 weren't related to the instance of COVID. They were related to the use of end-of-life pathway drugs, particularly administered in nursing homes. People were sent home with these drugs because the doctors and the hospital staff were frightened to let these COVID patients into the hospitals for fear of contracting the illness, which would amplify way out of proportion to their real risk. And this has been confirmed. This has been confirmed with the Allen inquiry, the COVID inquiry, where witnesses have been asked to confirm what happened during this period. And Wilson's analysis seems very, very accurate on that score. And there's been, I know there's been some governmental papers produced in the UK shows the same thing, that the reality is that these end-of-life pathways are not clean. They're used injudiciously. And the end result is that many people die prematurely and unnecessarily because they fast-tracked into these pathways instead of being put into preservation of life pathways, which would restore their full health. And it's a terrible burden to put on the doctors. It's a terrible burden for the families, and the outcome is rising mortality rates, which is what we're seeing across the board. We're seeing rising mortality rates in Australia. We're seeing rising mortality rates in the UK. We're seeing, the rising mortality rates in the United States, where, life expectancy has fallen for the first time in a century.
Can I ask you both, why is this happening? I mean, I thought human life was it. I thought it was so sacred. And if you go back 10, 20 years ago, it was very, very sacred. And nowadays it seems to be, shrug of the shoulders, basically. Someone is nearing the end. We should be showing them with a lot more respect and love. We should be fighting for them to, unless there's some horrible, horrible disease, and even then, because of my background, I really can't even agree with that. But I understand. But we seem to have. It's a bit like the environment, where they destroy the environment to save it, and it's this thing here where we destroy humanity to save it. I don't understand, David, in your and Gloria, with your observations and things like that, both of you would be appalled. Wouldn't you?
Can I make two comments? One is, there have been elements in our society, perhaps still are, who have a kind of death wish for humanity. And I just quote the famous playwright George Bernard Shaw, who was a member of the Fabian Society. That's a society that I understand a large proportion of the current Labour Party cabinet are or have been members of. George Bernard Shaw was briefly a lecturer. He was a member of the Fabian Society. He was briefly a lecturer at the Eugenic Education Society. And I'm quoting his words. These are his words, that nothing but a eugenic religion can save our civilization from the fate that has overtaken all previous civilizations. And in 1933, he went on to suggest that chemists should develop a humane poison gas for the extermination of those he regarded as social parasites. So, here was an upstanding playwright voicing some very disturbing thoughts indeed. And then, of course, we've got the pressures of money. We have the reality of organ harvesting. Various commentators have signalled this in relation to this legislation, assisted dying legislation. And we just heard about the drugs that were used during the Liverpool Pathway Protocol. Well, in terms of the drugs for assisted dying, the Private Members Bill proponent, Kim Leadbeater, has chosen the negative procedure, so-called, for selecting drugs. What does that mean, the negative procedure? It means that the Secretary of State can change the list of appropriate substances used for assisted dying without parliamentary debate or vote. So that would happen behind closed doors, the choice of the drugs. And there are three concerns that I've seen expressed about drugs. For example, from commentators Dr. Roger Meacock, vet, and Dawn Lester in her Substack. And the three concerns that between them they've expressed relate to the distressing effects of the likely drugs used for assisted dying. Not a lovely, kind death at all. It can be a very prolonged death in which people are paralysed, not able to express the pain that they're experiencing, water going to the lungs. Sorry, I don't want to distress readers. These commentators have also suggested that drugs that have been used can facilitate organ harvesting, because the barometer for death is brain death, not actual death. And that, of course, is an extraordinarily profitable industry, worth over $1 billion a year currently. And the drugs that I've read, and maybe the doctor can comment on these, have not actually been approved for use in assisted dying. I mean, I'm just going on what these commentators have said. I have no special knowledge of my own. But the 3 drugs quoted as used are digoxin, amitriptyline, and morphine.
David?
I've done quite a bit of detailed analysis of this. As you know, Mike, I'm a bit of an analyst and that sort of thing. And there are three main things I believe that are influencing this pattern. And the first one is AI. AI has been introduced extensively in healthcare systems, the AI protocols, and the problem is these AI systems are optimized not for human health. They're optimized for what's called resource allocation. Now, resource allocation is a euphemism for cost cutting. And so every year these AIs create more and more demand or exercise for cost cutting, savings. And they have AI has no insight into the impact that those savings have on human health. These AI systems have been programmed to consider the impact on human health. They are programmed for, as I say, resource allocation, which is another name for cost cutting, and so the stakes get higher and higher every year because there's more every year. Systems are looking for ways of cutting more and more systems, and the result of that is that these deaths that are occurring largely as an externality through these AI systems. The second thing is that this was highlighted by a report by Palliative Care Australia, and it showed that for every dollar spent on end of life pathways, it saved $2.15 on preservation of life pathways. So in other words, it's a lot cheaper for hospital managers to be putting people down through these end-of-life pathways than it is actually trying to preserve their life. So an example would be a person who might go into hospital with cancer. They might be, my age, 65 or something like that. And then the decision has to be made at some point whether that person is going to be treated for their cancer or whether they are going to be put into one of these end-of-life pathways. And of course, when you start nudging more and more people into these end-of-life pathways, you treat less and less people for their cancers, then of course that leads to a never-ending increase in mortality. And the third factor that's probably in the background, and this is a particularly grisly contributory factor, and that is that Western governments face a huge financial cliff in terms of their pension commitments, and basically United Kingdom, particularly Canada, Australia not quite so much, but certainly it's looming. All these governments are facing huge financial cliffs in terms of their pension commitments as baby boomers move into later years, and it's unsustainable. And so basically there's more and more pressure being exerted to save money. This might not be directly focused on euthanasia, but where there's any opportunity where governments can see fiscal savings, of course they're going to grab at it because they are looking to save opportunities. And if you've got somebody who's 80 years of age and can live for another 20 years on a British pension, there is a huge saving if they go into hospital and they put into these terminal care pathways prematurely as a result. So it's you've got to follow the money. And in Australia, it's a particularly worrying situation because I think that a lot of our administrators are not aware of how bad this is becoming. These AI algorithms in terms of limitations on resource allocations. And of course, what it's doing is absolutely destroying the public health system, because the public health system now is in crisis mode up and down the country. It can barely sustain itself. I don't think that managers realize why they're in this situation. All they know is that things are failing around them in all sorts of ways. And of course, the writing's on the wall that eventually they're going to turn to the big international insurers to bail themselves out of a crisis that has been created directly through the extension of these AI algorithms. And of course, who are the manufacturers of these AI algorithms? They're the very same people that are going to come in and bail the Australian healthcare system out. So you can see 10, 20 years down the track, insurance companies are going to be stepping in more and more, and the cost of healthcare in Australia and presumably other countries as well will escalate to a point where it becomes unaffordable.
Yeah. What is it compared to Australia, Gloria? And we've only got 2 minutes to go. What's it comparison-wise in the UK?
Well, I'm aware that doctors are given protocols right from the get-go when they're medical students. They're tested on whether they're following the protocols or not. And so the scope for independent thinking on the part of the doctor is trained out of people. That's the impression that I get from talking to a close family member who's undergoing medical training. Well, I don't know if it's always been the case that doctors have been encouraged to just follow the protocol, but I was speaking to somebody in France who said this is an enormous problem, that the scope for independent decision making on the part of doctors, especially during COVID, was severely reduced. Maybe we need to think again about aspects of medical training to restore the independent thinking of medical practitioners, because well, otherwise it's a form of de-skilling, isn't it? If we take a very highly trained person and just ask them to follow a protocol.
David, you've got 30 seconds to just wind this up. How do we fix it?
Well, it's very simple, actually, Mike, believe it or not, because I've been working on this. And the way to fix this is to optimize the algorithms, not to resource allocation, but to optimize them for human health. And if we change the settings of the algorithm, optimize them to human health, it will make a dramatic difference at no extra cost to the economy, because the extra costs in terms of medical treatments are offset by the huge savings in productivity that will result where people can get timely treatment, effective when they need it.
Got to wrap it up there. I think it's an important topic. We need to look at it deeper and longer, which we'll do in the next few weeks. My guests have been Professor Gloria Moss, founder of Truth University in London, and Dr. David Richards, Professor of Medicine. This has been The Big Issue. We've been looking at assisted dying right here on The World Today.